Hello, welcome you all. Yesterday's class we had a discussion about world literature in translation, and we were also given assignments about the importance of translation studies. Right? Today we are going to see one of the forms that is prescribed under this paper, world literature in translation. We will just quickly look at what the importance of translation and what world literature is, and then we will proceed to learn the form. Let me share the screen with you. Okay, I have titled my presentation as a reading of Khalil Gibran's "Ya Children Are Not Ya Children." The title itself is very attractive and very captivating. Let me press. Okay. So importance of translation studies, we all know translation only equips us to have glimpses of what is produced in any part of the world. I mean, literary translation opens the door to the vast arsenal of literature that is traditionally unavailable to a larger number of people. Before translation, we are not given access to the literature that is produced in some other language. But now it allows us to get to read these novels, which exposes us to their culture. So it enables people from different nations with different cultural backgrounds to read and appreciate other language literary works. So we get to know. So when you read a book that is produced in another nation, it doesn't only come with the story or the theme of it. It also comes along with the baggage of the beliefs, cultural practices, and everything about that land. So we get to know about the people and their behavioral pattern by reading the text produced in the country. So it reflects the values, ideas, and thoughts of the author, and possibly not only the author but his community, the ethnic group. And thus it enriches one's experiences about the world, and it enlarges one's view by exposing one to different dimensions of a problem. So you can approach a problem from different dimension, because we are exposed to this different varieties of how people treat that particular issue. So it is not only literature that we get to know, but we get to know about the people, their behavioral pattern, their culture, their dress, their food habits, everything that comes under culture, right? So we get to know about the people who are living in the world. Translation in other way has made possible uh, for the world to be changed into a global village. We are able to move to any part of the world through the exposure that we get through literature. So translation plays a very vital role in the modern man's life. Now, what is world literature? World literature is a sum total of world's national literatures. Anything that is written in any part of the world, when it is getting translated into English, it comes under the broad umbrella term called world literature. Previously, it refers to only the literature produced in the Western countries, Western or European countries. But now it is not the case. Any literature that is of merit being translated into English will be called world literature in translation. Now we will go quickly into the biographical details of the poet Khalil Gibran. He's a very famous poet. More than a poet, he's known as a philosopher. He's a Lebanese American writer. He was born on January 6, 1883. He was born in the village of Otaman in Lebanon, in Syria. He was born in a Catholic family, Western Catholic family called Maronite family. It's a section in Christianity. And in 1895, he migrated along with his mother and siblings to America. So he's a diaspora writer. He is not only a poet, as I told you, he's a philosopher too, but he not only a poet and a philosopher, but an artist too. He draws wonderfully, and he's known to the world as a philosopher, but he never wanted himself to be stamped as a philosopher. He never called himself as a philosopher at all, and he died on April 10, 1931. His magnum opus, his masterpiece is The Prophet, which is published in the year 1923. This is a very, very famous book that has been translated into nearly 100 languages. That speaks about the demand of the book. And what is so interesting is the fact that in a week it sold 50 copies, and in a year, just in 1957, it sold 1 million copies. So you can understand how much the book was a demand of the day. So this book, The Prophet, talks about the Prophet. The name of the Prophet is Al-Mustafa. He lived in the city of Ophalis for nearly 12 years. So Al-Mustafa was living in a place called Ophalis for 12 years. right? And the philosophers, they won't be staying in a place for a long time, so he wanted to move from that place to some other place to enlighten people. But the people of Ophalis were very, very sad to let him go. So when he was about to board the ship, the people stopped him with request of making him stay there, but he did not relent to their request. Instead, when they asked for some advice for leading a better life, he started to give them his philosophies on living a better life, how human condition could be improved. And these philosophies are in the form of poetry, and they are collected and presented together. And this poetical collection is divided into a number of chapters which addresses themes like love, marriage, children, giving, eating, drinking, from petty subjects to a very, very complicated and very philosophical subjects like religion, death, prayer, good and bad, all things that the human being comes across in his life or her life is addressed in this poem. So it's a very important work of art which makes the people, the readers, lead a better life. So that is the significance of the book, and that may be the reason why this book has been translated to over 100 languages. Now we come to the analysis of the poem. This particular poem comes under the category on children. The Prophet Al Mustafa is giving the people a lecture on how to bring up children, and this is a review of the usual expectations of the parents about children. Right? Usually, parents, they try to see whatever they couldn't do in their life, they try to make the children do. And this poem makes us to rethink on that. It's highly philosophical and very meticulously presented with the effective employment of images which are very, very picturesque. So we are going to the text of it. Your children are not your children. I told you this comes under the chapter on children. So he begins the poem like this: your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. Very beautifully conveyed. He says that you can never say that these children, your children are yours. You are just a medium. And they are, life has to prolong. It is for the sake of life to continue that they are born, and it is not for you that your children are born. You may like it, being children, you may like it. Your individuality and your thoughts are all valued by the poet or respected by the poet more than that of the parents. So this poem will appeal to you more than your parents. So he explains that thought further by saying they come through you but not from you. Okay, you are just a medium, I told you, as though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. They are with you. Physically, they are with you, but they do not belong to you. They are their own. You can never possess your children. They have their, individuality. They have their individual life. So don't think that as you have given birth to your children, they belong to you. You can possess them. No, it is not so. Then you may give them your love, but not your thoughts. This is a very, very important part of the poem. You can love them. The parents are allowed only to love the children. You cannot think for them. Don't make them, don't enforce on them what is good and what is bad. Let them decide what is good for them and what is not good for them. Don't enforce your thoughts into your children. You can only love them, or they have their own thoughts. They are capable of thinking. So don't enforce your thought process into your children. You may house their bodies, but not their souls. Another beautiful expression. You can see them as body. You can hold them. You can kiss them. You can embrace them, but you can never touch their soul. It belongs only to them, for their souls dwell. Well, they reside in the house of tomorrow. Children are the individuals of tomorrow. That you belong to the past world, but your children belong to the world that is yet to come, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. So the world of your children are beyond your reach, right? Even in your dreams are the places where you can travel as and how you like. Okay, what is not possible in your real life, you can visualize through your dreams. But even in your dreams, you cannot reach the place of your children. They are far ahead of you. You may strive to be like them. If you want, you can emulate them. You can follow them as your example, but seek not to make them like you. Never make them like you. For life goes not backward, not tarries with yesterday. Why you should not engage in the process of making them follow you? Because you belong to the world that is gone by. They are the people who have to face the world that is going to come. So you have to follow them. Don't make them to follow you, because life always moves forward and never it stays. Tarries means it stays for a longer period. Never stays in the past. It has to progress. It has to move on. So never try to hold them back. But if you want, you can travel with them. Don't pull them back to your time. And the last stanza is the most beautiful one of the entire poem, where he brings in the images of bows and arrows and the archer. So he says that you are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might. The capital H tells you that he is talking about the God. So here the poet is making comparisons of parents, children, and the creator, one who created both the parents and children. The parents are the bow and the arrow is the child, and one who sends the arrow is the God. So he says that all the three are important. You cannot do away with one. Bow is needed, arrow is needed, and the sender, the archer, is also needed. So they are all interconnected. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite. The creator has one aim. When he creates a human being, when he gives birth, when he allows a life to be born on this world, the archer has an aim, and it is set far off in the infinite. And he equips the child to reach that place. That his arrows may go swift and far, fast and far. So his aim is always far in the future. Let a bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. Only when the bow bends, the arrow can reach the mark. So bend for your children with gladness. Don't grumble. Don't try to enforce your dreams on them. Usually you would have seen parents, they would like to become engineers or doctors, and they couldn't. So what do? They enforce their dreams on their children. So they keep on urging the children or pestering the children to fulfill their dreams. So they try to bend the arrow. But what the poet is saying is that you should bend. The arrow should, it is not the arrow that should bend, but it is the bow that should bend. So that too, not with grudging. You have to bend yourself with gladness. Believe in God and believe in His plan, and bend with gladness. For even as He loves the arrow that flies, so He loves also the bow that is stable. So He says that you will never regret for bending, because the archer, the God, the Creator, loves not only the arrow but also the bow. Right? God loves you as well as your children. So He will make you finally happy with your child's life. So you would not regret if you completely submit yourself to the will of God, which always wishes the benefit of both the archer and both the bow and the arrow. So this is a beautiful poem. So here what the poet is trying to say through this poem is that parents should give ultimate freedom to their children to decide about their life. They have to think, they have to make plans for the future, and they have to dream about their life. Parents' role is only to be with them, to assist them, to help them fulfill their needs. Their only duty is to love them and not to make thinking on their behalf. Let the child think. Let the child think, and let the parent help the child, equip the child to think. This is the major idea that gets conveyed through this beautiful poem. And as I have already mentioned, there are brilliant images that the poet uses in the poem, and they are bow, arrow, and archer. As I have already mentioned to you, bow refers to the parents who have to bend in order to make the arrows reach the mark. Only if the bow bends and it is held steadily, the arrow will reach the destination. So bow are the parents, arrows are the children, and one who aims the arrow, strikes the arrow is the one, or wields the arrow is the one who created both the parents and the children. A brilliant thought. Isn't it? Very simple poem, but a very brilliant poem. So in a nutshell, what the poet is trying to say in the poem, your children are not your children, is that you can never possess them. You cannot choose. Whether which one to give birth to. You cannot choose whether you want to give birth to a son or a daughter, right? Like that, you cannot choose for your child. You can't ask them to follow the parents. The parents cannot ask the children to follow their footsteps. But the poet says that they have to, if they are willing, then they should follow the footprints of the children, because that only takes them to the future. Then they cannot insist. Don't make them ask them to do this and that. Let them decide for themselves what they would like to do and what they do not like to do. You can do only one thing. Your job is only to love them. And you cannot guide them, but you can be of great support to them. Be with them in all their decisions, whether it is good or bad. Be with them and ask them. The error that you make is a learning process. It's a step to a better future. You may have failed in your errand, but still it gives you some learning experience that makes your life better. So the entire responsibility is on the child to make, and the parents are supposed to be just a guiding, not a guiding force, but an assisting force or a presence that supports them mentally, because the souls belong to only the children. A beautiful poem, and hope you understood the poem. We will discuss about it. If you have any doubts, we will discuss in the coming classes. Thank you.